So, Greg, let's talk about some of the options for improving the governance, the management, the fiscal picture at the T. Uh, the Senate seems to think that an expanded control board, increasing the number of members and giving the Secretary of Transportation and the governor authority to directly hire the GM, will make a big difference in the governance of the T, and that's all we need to do. Not create a new level of bureaucracy, and just move on from that position. What's your appraisal of that approach?
Well, I think that when Governor Baker originally proposed the Fiscal Control Board, it was in the context of a time that he didn't have control of the board. So a lot of, in other words, he didn't have majority control of the board because of the staggered appointment process. So a lot of people might have viewed the Fiscal Control Board as a kind of a sideway into taking over the T without having to wait for the board to be reappointed. But I was at the hearing at the State House, and in here you had three people testifying simultaneously. Governor Baker, who did a turnaround with Harvard Pilgrim. Harvard Pilgrim was basically on the brink of bankruptcy, and I'm not using hyperbole. It had to be restored with Attorney General Riley's help, and they went from virtual insolvency to becoming a tremendous success once again. Then you had Jay Ash, who was a receiver in Chelsea. Then you had Chris Gabrielle, who was a receiver in Springfield. Here are these three really talented people, and they're saying, "This is what we need," and this is the power we need to fix the T. And when I testified, they said, "Well, do they really need it anymore? Because he's already got control of the T." Well, I'm saying, look, these people are talented people. Give them what they want. They want additional authority. Otherwise, you're basically limiting their ability. And so that's my big takeaway.
Jim, so control board, why not? Baker fixed Harvard Pilgrim. Jay Ash, who became a city manager after receivership, helped get Chelsea back on its feet. Chris Gabrielle was the head of the control board in Springfield. What's wrong with that approach for the MBTA, which certainly needs a solid push into a more robust structure?
Well, I think the approach of a control board gets in the way of accountability, and it gets in the way of getting things done on a fast track. It's interesting, if you remember, both myself as a sort of progressive liberal Democrat and the Pioneer Institute agreed early on when the governor took office and there was the meltdown. We agreed on the need to remove the then existing MassDOT board. And that has happened. And all of those board members resigned, and the governor now has reappointed his own people, and he controls the MassDOT board. And there's no reason why a subcommittee of that board can't basically function as a control board. I was Secretary of Transportation. I can tell you something about having boards. Boards often frustrate. They don't facilitate. And what I think the governor and the secretary really need now is the ability to move quickly, to be agile, to get the job done. We all know what the job is that needs to get done. It's investment in safety systems, power systems, signal systems. There's no magic or mystery to what has to happen. Having two boards and two layers of bureaucracy, it seems to me, will only end up frustrating his agenda. So I just think that it's at this point an unnecessary and misguided approach to getting the job done.
So, Greg, what about a subcommittee of the MassDOT board, sending a group of people off to work on the T and have that be perhaps their exclusive focus?
I really agree with Jim Aloisi's point, and that there was a great necessity for the governor to have appointment over the members of the board earlier. But the big difference here is that in this legislation, the board has authority to do some things. One, And most importantly, and I want to redirect Gabrielle Gurley to this point as an adjunct to the Fiscal Control Board issue. The governor's bill would end final and binding arbitration at the MBTA. The MBTA, this to me is the single most serious impediment to reforming the T. And this control board is part and parcel of the solution to that problem. In 2009, the legislature transferred the MBTA employees to the Group Insurance Commission, the same plan that 300,000 state and municipal employees are under. What the Carmen's Union did was they went to the Department of Labor and blocked hundreds of millions of dollars of federal transit funds from coming to Massachusetts and kicked it into a final and binding arbitration system. And they said that they wanted to be made whole for every cent that it cost any member in addition of being on the insurance plan. The T had a great lawyer. He laid out as the biggest problem at the T, final and binding arbitration. That's the only final and binding arbitration labor system in the state of Massachusetts. It's an exception. The Fiscal Control Board would be empowered to have to be the final approver of binding arbitration. This approach has been upheld by the Supreme Court of the United States. It was upheld by Appellate Court Judge Stephen Breyer of Harvard Law School, and then the Appellate Court, now the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court. So, to me, if you think that they can solve the T without getting an additional authority, without getting rid of the Pacheco law, it's not going to happen.
Jim, what do you think? Is binding arbitration at the top of the list for I know you supported an expanded MassDOT board. Is that the first thing they should tackle?
It wouldn't be my first thing to tackle. My first thing to tackle would be getting a system in place to reinvest in the kinds of things I've been talking about, safety and reliability systems. But look, I think what Greg has pointed out, and what really we're talking about here, is what kind of additional management rights and management reforms are needed at the T. That's a very separate conversation, and I'm happy to have it. But it's a very separate conversation, it seems to me, from creating another layer of bureaucracy in the control board. Now, we can talk about management rights, we can talk about Pacheco law. I think those are debates that probably need to take place, but I think they need to take place on a separate plane, separate playing field, and let's not get distracted by a control board. You see, the control board is being used as a way, frankly, to provide cover for people who historically have wanted to, and I'll use the phrase, union bust at the T. And look, I'm in favor of requiring strong performance metrics at the T. But I think that these discussions about Pacheco and binding arbitration, while necessary, should frankly take second seat to the kind of repair to the infrastructure that needs to be done.
Well,
so Greg, let's move on, because our time is short on the binding arbitration question. Pacheco, let's put that aside for a minute. Let's just talk about governance. Explain to me why a subcommittee of the MassDOT board is not the way forward from your perspective.
I'm going to go back to my point, Gabrielle. This, to me, is putting the conversation in a little cubbyhole way off where it shouldn't be center. The big issue is that the governor has proposed getting rid of the Pacheco law. He's proposed changing final and binding arbitration, the person who originally proposed this idea was Barney Frank. He's no conservative. He put in legislation to give management rights. These were overridden by the Pacheco law later on. This bill isn't about, everybody's focusing, or Jim's focusing on the control board. It's like, that's the bill. No, That's a little small part of the bill. The big part of the bill is the muscle in the bill to get at management rights problems, to get at Pacheco law, to get at final and binding arbitration. That's in the bill.
Well,
It's
I think
going to be another conversation.
the first thing that the legislature needs to do is determine the structure that has to go forward. And right now, the conversation seems to be control board versus an expanded MassDOT board. So if it is not a control board, if it's not a control board, then what is it?
Well,
I think.
Let's go back to Jim.
Yeah. Again, I think, first of all, if it were me, I would just make it a subcommittee of the current board. I think that that's the way to do this, because I think that the critical infrastructure repair and reinvestment issues that need to take place have to happen quickly. We're going to find, it's very nice weather right now, but the winter will be upon us before we blink our eyes. And all of this debate is frustrating, it seems to me, the need to move with agility toward getting the kind of reinvestment and, frankly, mobility plan prepared for next winter.
Is there a compromise position? Is there a third way to do this? Obviously, people are going to stick to their guns on a control board. Greg, you're going to stick to that. Jim, you see an expanded MassDOT board. Is there another way to do this that may be sort of a compromise position, or a position we haven't heard from as yet? And Scott talked about a state takeover. That's unlikely because of the debt situation. Right? The state doesn't likely want to have the T's debt on their books. Is there another way?
Let me ask a question of Jim Aloisi, and I have tremendous respect for Jim Aloisi, going back for more than 30 years in transportation leadership in this state, including many roles before you were Secretary of Transportation. You served with many boards. You just mentioned about boards. I've sat on boards. My take on boards, not that helpful. And it doesn't, in other words, when you talk about the board of directors of the Turnpike Authority or the MBTA or MassDOT, it's not like the board of directors of Fidelity or Coca-Cola. Okay, where the board comes in and they actually are running the company. No, these people come in on Wednesday. There's coffee. There's rolls. They say, yes, I. See you next month. That's the problem with the T board, and it doesn't really work. And you know what? I'm going to call you on this because you were a reformer, and when you're running an agency, it all comes down to the agency leader. The board has very little to do with it. That's my personal take. Do you agree with that?
I couldn't agree with you more.
Jim will give Jim the last word.
I couldn't agree with Greg more, and I've written about this in CommonWealth. I think boards are often frustrate and don't facilitate. But that's why, if it were me and you wanted to know what my preferred option would be, it would be to have no board. I would make, look, I have a lot of confidence in Stephanie Pollack. I've known her for many, many years. She's an exceptional leader, and the governor was wise to appoint her. I would make her the transportation czar. I would unleash her. I would be in favor of a strong secretary who's unfettered by boards, who's responsible to the governor and the people, and I have a ton of confidence that she is the leader that can pull this together, because I know that her heart and her head are both in the right place. And so my option, my alternative is let's forget about boards. Let's empower the secretary with the power and the strength to get the job done, and let her go at it. Because having been in that position, and I agree with Greg, boards are, there is a human dynamic to boards that I have never in my life seen enable facilitating anything. All it seems to do is slow things down and frustrate. So let the secretary be a strong secretary. Don't put chains and burdens on her. She's having to see a million people on a million boards and placate each of them. By the time she gets through talking to every board member and making them happy, 3/4 of the day will be gone.
Hey, I know this is the end. I'm going to give my call to arms to all those commuters out there. Come forward. Where are you? You were freezing on the platforms. I was with you. 1.5 million people delayed, freezing cold. You were really mad. Now you're just sitting on your ass. Come on. Come forward. Let's start fighting. You know, the House of Representatives, they've adopted some tough new standards for the T management. Speaker DeLeo, Brian Dempsey, the Ways and Means Chairman. The Senate, to me, laid down. They're giving the governor nothing except expanding the board. It'd be more effective to repaint the green lane cars yellow. That would do more to reform the T than what the Senate is in that bill. Look, the Senate's going to step up and do something to give the new, whether it's Stephanie Pollock, as Jim, that idea of Jim Aloisi's is not a bad idea, by the way. Very good idea if they give her the power to do something, but not.
Gentlemen, let's leave it there. That is a very interesting suggestion. Empower the secretary. We'll leave it there, and hopefully we can take this conversation up again at a later time. Jim, Greg, thank you very much.
Thanks, Gabrielle.
Thanks.